The rain-soaked cardboard beneath her was disintegrating, just like everything else in her life, when the man in the $1,000 suit knelt beside her and whispered 4 words that shattered her reality. "You're Charlotte Whitmore's daughter." The alley behind Morrison's diner smelled like grease and despair, a combination I'd grown intimately familiar with over the past 2 years. I huddled against the brick wall, my sleeping bag pulled tight around shoulders that had forgotten what warmth felt like. November in Boston was unforgiving, and tonight the wind cut through the city like it had a personal vendetta. My name was Maya Brooks. 24 years old, though I felt ancient. A college dropout with $47,000 in student debt, no family, and a resume that couldn't compete with the hundreds of other desperate applicants flooding every minimum wage job posting. 2 years ago, I'd had an apartment, a job at a marketing firm, and a future that looked almost normal. Then the layoffs came, then the evictions, then the slow, humiliating slide into invisibility. The homeless are ghosts in expensive cities. People look through you, around you, never at you. I'd become an expert at reading that particular type of blindness in strangers' eyes. "Maya, you awake?" The voice belonged to Jimmy, a 60-something veteran who'd claimed the dumpster spot 3 months ago. His face was weathered like old leather, but his eyes were kind, the only kindness I could count on these days. "Yeah." I pushed myself up, every joint protesting. "What's up?" "Cops are doing a sweep tonight." Heard it from Carlos. "We got to move before midnight." Another sweep. Another night of gathering my pathetic collection of belongings. 2 changes of clothes, a broken phone charger, a water-damaged paperback, and the only photograph I had left of my mother, and finding somewhere new to be invisible. Where? I asked, though it didn't really matter. Every spot was temporary, every moment was borrowed. Maybe the shelter on 4th. If we get there before... Those beds are gone by 6 p.m., Jimmy. You know that. He nodded, defeat sagging his shoulders. We both knew the math. Boston had roughly 6,000 homeless people and maybe 3,000 shelter beds on a good night. The rest of us made do with doorways, underpasses, and prayers that we'd wake up in the morning. I started rolling up my sleeping bag. My fingers numb despite the threadbare gloves I wore. The photograph slipped out. My mother's face, young and smiling, holding a baby that was supposedly me. I didn't remember her. She died when I was 3, and I'd bounced through foster care until aging out at 18 with nothing but her picture and a first name, Isabelle. No last name, no family history, no roots to anchor me when life decided to kick me overboard. "You okay, kid?" Jimmy was watching me with that expression I hated, pity mixed with helplessness. "Fine. Always fine." I tucked the photo into my jacket's inner pocket, close to my heart where it couldn't get lost. It was the only proof I'd ever been someone's daughter, someone's family, someone's anything. The diner's back door opened, releasing a cloud of warm air and the smell of fresh coffee. Maria, the night manager, stepped out with 2 styrofoam containers. "Got some leftover soup," she said, her accent thick with the Dominican Republic she still called home. "And bread. Eat before it gets cold." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they were all I had. Maria's eyes softened. "You're a good girl, Maya. Something's gonna change for you. I feel it." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that life could be anything other than this endless cycle of cold, hunger, and survival. But hope was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. Hope hurt more than acceptance. After Maria went back inside, Jimmy and I ate in silence, the soup warming my insides, if not my soul. Around us, the city hummed with life. Cars passing, people laughing in distant apartments. The whole world going about its business while we existed in the margins. Footnotes in a story no one wanted to read. I had a daughter once, Jimmy said suddenly. About your age now. Haven't seen her in 12 years. What happened? Life, bad choices, pride. He stared into his soup like it held answers. You remind me of her sometimes. Same stubborn hope in your eyes even when you think it's gone. I don't feel very hopeful, Jimmy. That's when it matters most. A black Mercedes pulled into the alley, unusual for this part of town at this hour. The headlights swept over us, and I instinctively shrank back. Sometimes people came looking for easy targets. Vulnerable people in dark alleys made for convenient victims. But the car stopped, and a man stepped out. Mid-50s, silver hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life. He looked completely out of place, like a prince who'd wandered into the wrong fairy tale, and he was staring directly at me. Maya Brooks? His voice was cultured, careful, with an edge of something I couldn't identify. Urgency? Disbelief? Every survival instinct screamed at me to run. Strangers knowing your name was never good. But Jimmy was beside me, and running would mean leaving him alone with whatever this was. Who's asking? My voice came out stronger than I felt. The man took a step closer, and I saw his hands were shaking. His eyes, steel gray and intense, moved over my face like he was memorizing it, or perhaps recognizing something he'd been searching for. My name is Richard Pemberton. I'm an attorney with Whitmore and Associates. He paused, seeming to gather himself. I've been looking for you for 22 years. If someone appeared out of nowhere claiming to have searched for you for decades, would you trust them or run? What would your first instinct be? Let me know in the comments. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began to fall, cold, relentless drops that turned the alley's grime into rivers of diluted misery. Richard Pemberton didn't seem to notice. He stood there in his expensive suit, getting soaked, staring at me like I was a ghost made flesh. I don't know you, I said, backing up until the brick wall stopped me. And I don't know any Whitmore. Your mother was Isabelle Whitmore. He said it gently, but the words hit like a blow. She was the only daughter of Charlotte and Robert Whitmore of the Whitmore family, one of the oldest and wealthiest families in New England. The world tilted. My mother's name was Isabelle Brooks. She was a waitress. She died when I was 3. Yes? His expression cracked with something that looked like grief. She took the name Brooks when she ran away at 18. She was trying to escape her mother's control, trying to build a different life. She died in a car accident 3 years after you were born. How do you... My voice broke. How do you know any of this? Because I helped her disappear. Richard took another step forward, rain streaming down his face. I was her mother's attorney, but Isabelle was my goddaughter. When she asked me to help her start over, I couldn't refuse. I got her the fake identification, the new social security number, everything she needed to become Isabelle Brooks. That's illegal. Yes. No apology in his voice. And when she died, I tried to find you, but you'd already been taken into state custody, and with Isabelle's false identity, there was no paper trail connecting you to the Whitmore family. I spent 2 decades searching through foster care records, following dead ends, paying private investigators, and 3 days ago, I finally found you. Jimmy was watching this exchange like it was a movie he couldn't quite follow. I felt the same way, unmoored from reality, floating in a narrative that couldn't possibly be about my life. Why? The question encompassed everything. Why search for me? Why did my mother run? Why was this man standing in an alley in the rain, talking about families and fortunes when I was just trying to survive until morning? Because your grandmother, Charlotte Whitmore, died 6 weeks ago. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder, protected in a waterproof sleeve. "And according to her will, you are the sole heir to the Whitmore estate, all of it." The folder hung between us like a challenge, like a trap, like salvation. I didn't take it. "That's not possible. I'm nobody. I don't have a family. I don't—" "You are Charlotte Whitmore's only direct descendant." His voice was firm now, attorney-like. "Her daughter died. Her husband died. The estate, the fortune, the properties, everything passes to you. It's approximately $3.2 billion in total assets." The number was so large it became meaningless. 3 billion. I couldn't comprehend $1,000, let alone billions. I looked down at my stained jeans, my broken shoes, the sleeping bag still clutched in my filthy hands. This is a joke, or a scam, or— Look at this. Richard opened the folder with shaking hands and pulled out a photograph. Old, slightly faded, showing a young woman who looked exactly like the one in my jacket pocket. But this photo had context. The woman was standing in front of a massive estate, wearing elegant clothes, smiling with the confidence of someone who'd never known what it meant to be cold, or hungry, or invisible. "That's Isabelle Whitmore at 17, Richard said quietly. "1 year before she ran away. Before she became Isabelle Brooks. Before she had you." I pulled out my own photograph with trembling fingers. Same woman, same smile, different worlds. "And this," Richard produced another photo, "is Charlotte Whitmore." The woman in the picture was elderly, regal, with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. But the bone structure was familiar. The set of the jaw, the shape of the eyes. I'd seen that face in mirrors, in bathroom reflections, in fast food restaurants, in the dark windows of buildings where I wasn't allowed to exist. No. But even as I said it, I was seeing it, the genetic echo between these women and whatever lived in my own reflection. "Your grandmother spent 22 years grieving 2 daughters," Richard continued, his voice thick with emotion. "The one who ran away and the granddaughter she never got to meet. When she died, she left everything to you. She never stopped hoping you existed somewhere, never stopped asking me to keep searching. Why didn't she look for my mother? Why didn't she try to bring her back? She did. For 3 years before Isabelle died, Charlotte hired investigators, pleaded with me to reveal where she was. But Isabelle made me promise never to tell. She said her mother would destroy any life she tried to build, that Charlotte's love was more prison than blessing." He paused. "After Isabelle died, Charlotte lived with that regret every day, and with the hope that somewhere her granddaughter was alive." Jimmy cleared his throat. "Maya, I think you should listen to this man. This is insane." I was shaking now, and not from the cold. "People like me don't inherit billions. We don't have families waiting in mansions. We die in alleys and get buried in unmarked graves, and nobody—" "You are not people like you." Richard's voice cut through my spiral. "You are Maya Brooks, born Maya Isabelle Whitmore. You are the granddaughter of one of the most powerful women in New England. You are the rightful heir to a fortune that could change everything, and you deserve to know the truth about where you came from." The rain intensified, turning the alley into a curtain of water that separated us from the rest of the world. In my pocket, my mother's photograph seemed to burn against my chest. "What do I have to do?" The words came out small, frightened. "Come with me, tonight. We'll start with DNA testing to confirm what I already know. Then lawyers, paperwork, the reading of the will. But first," his voice softened, "first you need to get warm, get clean, get fed. You need to stop surviving and start living." "I don't know how to do that anymore." "Then learn." He held out his hand. "Please, Maya." "Your grandmother's last wish was that I find you. Don't let her die without that peace." I looked at Jimmy, my only friend in this brutal world. He nodded, his eyes shining with something that looked like pride. Go, kid. This is your shot. I took Richard Pemberton's hand. His grip was warm, steady, real. And just like that, the girl in the alley began to dissolve, making room for someone I'd never imagined I could be. The Whitmore estate loomed before me like something from a period drama, all stone and sprawling grounds, gates that looked like they could repel armies. Richard's Mercedes whispered up the circular driveway, and I pressed my face against the window like a child, trying to comprehend that this place supposedly belonged to me. This can't be real, I whispered for the 100th time since leaving the alley. It's very real. Richard glanced at me, concern in his eyes. But we're taking this slowly. Tonight you'll stay in the guest house. Tomorrow we'll start the official process. The guest house turned out to be larger than any apartment I'd ever lived in. Richard introduced me to Mrs. Chen, the estate manager, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of Maria from the diner. Draw her a bath, Richard instructed. Get her whatever she needs. And Mrs. Chen, be gentle. She's had a significant shock. After he left, Mrs. Chen led me upstairs to a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a spa. Marble everywhere, a tub that could fit 3 people, towels so soft they felt like clouds. I'll get you some clothes, Mrs. Chen said. Take your time. There's no rush here. Alone, I stared at the woman in the mirror. Dirty face, matted hair, hollowed eyes that had seen too much hardship. I looked feral, damaged, nothing like the elegant women in those photographs. The bath was almost too hot, but I sank into it anyway, letting it burn away the layers of grime and cold. I cried, huge, racking sobs that echoed off the marble, mourning the girl who'd spent 2 years believing she was worthless and terrified of the person I might have to become. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a robe that cost more than my entire wardrobe from before, Mrs. Chen had laid out clothes on the bed. Simple, expensive, in exactly my size. How did you know? Mr. Pemberton is very thorough, she smiled. He's been preparing for this day for a long time. That night I lay in a bed with sheets that felt like silk, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I'd wake up back in the alley, this whole thing just a fever dream brought on by hypothermia. But morning came, and I was still here. The next 3 days were a blur of tests, lawyers, and revelations that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life. The DNA test came back positive, 99.9% match to Charlotte Whitmore's genetic profile kept on file. I was, beyond any doubt, her granddaughter. The will reading happened in an oak-paneled office that smelled like old money and older secrets. A dozen lawyers sat around a massive table while someone read from a document that seemed to go on forever. When they got to the assets, my head spun. The Whitmore estate and all associated properties, valued at approximately $180 million, investment portfolios totaling $2.1 billion. Whitmore Industries, a private equity firm valued at $800 million, various other holdings, accounts, and assets, bringing the total estate value to approximately $3.2 billion. And it's all mine. My voice sounded very small in that large room. Not quite. Richard leaned forward. According to the will stipulations, you inherit everything, but with conditions. Of course, there were always conditions. Charlotte wanted to ensure you were protected, he continued, so she established a trust. For the first year, you'll receive a monthly allowance of $50,000, enough to live comfortably while you adjust. Full access to the fortune comes after 12 months, provided you meet certain requirements. What requirements? You must live on the estate. You must participate in learning about the family business, and, he hesitated, You must make a genuine effort to understand why your mother ran away and your grandmother lived with that loss. Charlotte believed understanding your family history was crucial before you could properly steward the fortune. So I'm trapped here. No. Richard's voice was firm. You can refuse the inheritance. Walk away right now. The estate would then go to various charities Charlotte designated. But you'd be giving up not just money, but answers about your mother, your family, yourself. I thought about the alley, the cold, the constant fear, the invisibility. I'll stay. The media explosion happened within hours. Lost heiress found living homeless in Boston, screamed the headlines. My face, cleaned up but still gaunt, appeared on every news site, every social media platform. The narrative was irresistible. Cinderella story meets social commentary on homelessness and inequality. The messages started flooding in. Distant relatives I'd never heard of claiming close bonds, charities requesting donations, people I'd gone to high school with suddenly remembering we were best friends. Everyone wanted something from the girl who'd gone from nothing to billions overnight. Ignore them, Mrs. Chen advised, finding me frozen in front of a laptop, reading comment after comment about my life. They don't know you. They don't deserve access to you. But some messages cut deeper. You don't deserve this. People work their whole lives and have nothing. You're just lucky. Proof the system is rigged. She'll probably waste it all. She looks like she's still homeless. Money can't buy class. I closed the laptop, feeling sick. They weren't entirely wrong. I didn't deserve this any more than I deserved freezing in alleys. Life wasn't about deserving. It was random, brutal, and occasionally miraculous. 3 weeks in, Richard took me to Whitmore Industries headquarters in downtown Boston. The building was all glass and steel, a monument to the fortune I supposedly controlled. Your grandmother built this from nothing, Richard explained as we rode the elevator to the top floor. She inherited money, yes, but she turned millions into billions through smart investments and ruthless business decisions. I don't know anything about business. You'll learn, or you'll hire people who do. That's what wealth buys. Options. The executive floor was filled with people in expensive suits, all of whom stopped and stared when we entered. I felt their judgment, their skepticism. The homeless girl playing dress-up in designer clothes that still hung loose on my too-thin frame. This is Maya Whitmore, Richard announced to the assembled board members. Charlotte's granddaughter and the new owner of Whitmore Industries. The silence was deafening. An older man, late 60s with the bearing of someone used to being in charge, stood slowly. With all due respect, Mr. Pemberton, this girl has no experience, no education in business or finance. She can't possibly. She owns 100% of this company, Gerald. Richard's voice was ice. Which means your employment is at her discretion. Gerald's face flushed. This is absurd. Charlotte would never have wanted. Charlotte spent 22 years hoping this day would come. Richard turned to me. Maya, these are the people who run your company. They're very good at what they do, but they need to understand who they work for now. All eyes on me, waiting, judging. I thought about Jimmy in the alley, sharing his last can of soup, about Maria giving away food she could have taken home to her own family, about every person who'd looked through me like I was invisible. I don't know anything about running a company, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I barely graduated high school. I was homeless. I'm probably everything you're thinking, unqualified, unprepared, in over my head. Gerald's expression shifted to something like triumph. But, I continued, I know what it's like to have nothing, to be dismissed and discarded, and I know that this fortune, this company, this power, it can either mean something or it can be just another trophy for people who've never struggled a day in their lives. So here's what's going to happen. You'll teach me everything, and I'll learn. and we'll figure out together how to make this company something my grandmother would be proud of, something my mother might not have run from." The room was silent. Then Richard smiled. "I believe that concludes today's introduction. Maya will be shadowing various departments over the coming weeks. You will accommodate her, answer her questions, and treat her with the respect she deserves. Understood?" Reluctant nods around the table. As we left, Richard squeezed my shoulder. "Well done. Charlotte would have liked that. Would my mother have?" His smile faded. "Your mother ran away because she felt suffocated by expectations and control. But she also ran away because she was 18 and scared and didn't know how to tell her mother she wanted something different. There's a difference between honoring someone's fears and letting them define you. If you suddenly inherited billions, would you feel like you deserved it? Or would the pressure and judgment from others make you want to give it all away? Drop your honest thoughts below. 6 months into my new life, I still hadn't figured out how to sleep in silk sheets without feeling like an imposter. The guest house had become my sanctuary, small enough to feel manageable, isolated enough that I could pretend the massive estate and fortune didn't exist for a few hours. But tonight, something was pulling me toward the main house. Richard had given me a box 3 weeks ago, my grandmother's personal journals, spanning decades. I'd been too scared to open it, too afraid of what I might find. But tonight, unable to sleep, I finally broke the seal. Charlotte Whitmore's handwriting was elegant, controlled, the script of someone who'd been taught perfect penmanship in an era when such things mattered. The journal started in 1975, the year my mother was born. "She's perfect. Isabelle Rose Whitmore. I will give her everything I didn't have. She will be strong, educated, powerful. She will never need to depend on anyone." I flipped forward, watching my mother grow through Charlotte's eyes. "Isabelle is struggling with her studies. I've hired the best tutors. She must excel. She wants to take art classes instead of business. I've explained this is not acceptable. Art is a hobby, not a future." Isabelle's teacher called to say she seems withdrawn, unhappy. The teacher doesn't understand the pressure required to build greatness. The entries became tenser as my mother approached 18. "She barely speaks to me anymore. Everything I do is wrong, suffocating, controlling. She doesn't understand I'm preparing her for a world that will try to diminish her. Robert says I'm too hard on her. He doesn't understand that gentleness is a luxury women can't afford in business. I'm teaching her to survive." And then the final entry about my mother before the years of silence. "Isabelle is gone. She left a note saying she can't breathe here, can't be the person I need her to be. Richard won't tell me where she is, even after I begged, threatened, pleaded. My daughter chose absence over my love. What did I do wrong? How did I fail so completely that my own child would rather disappear than stay?" Tears blurred the words. I'd spent 24 years thinking I had no family, no one who cared. But here was proof of a grandmother who'd loved her daughter desperately, in the only way she knew how. A woman who'd confused control with care, strength with rigidity. The later journals were even more heartbreaking. Richard confirmed Isabelle died 3 years ago. Car accident. She was alone. She died alone because I pushed her away. I will never forgive myself. I dream about a granddaughter. Isabelle must have had a child before she died. The timeline suggests it. But Richard won't confirm, and I have no proof. Am I clinging to fantasy because the truth is too painful? Another investigator came up empty. "Maybe there is no granddaughter. Maybe I'm searching for redemption that doesn't exist. But I can't stop. It's the only thing that makes the loss bearable." The final entry was dated 6 weeks before Charlotte died. "I am dying. Cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. The doctors say weeks, maybe a month. Richard promises he'll keep searching for Isabelle's daughter, if she exists. My greatest regret is that I loved imperfectly. I thought strength meant control. I thought protection meant walls. I taught my daughter to be strong and forgot to teach her she was already enough. If there is a granddaughter, if she reads this someday, I hope she understands I tried. I failed, but I tried. And I hope she's braver than I was, strong enough to be vulnerable, powerful enough to be kind. Everything I wanted to be but never quite managed. I sat in the dark, crying for the grandmother I'd never met, for the mother who'd run away trying to find herself, for 3 generations of women who'd all struggled with the same question. How do you be strong without becoming hard? A knock on the door startled me. Mrs. Chen stood there, bathrobe wrapped tight, concern on her face. I saw your light on. Are you all right? I'm reading my grandmother's journals. She nodded, understanding immediately. May I come in? We sat together, and I found myself telling her everything, about the guilt I felt for inheriting money I hadn't earned, about feeling like a fraud in designer clothes, about not knowing how to honor either my mother's choice to run or my grandmother's choice to build. Your grandmother was a complicated woman, Mrs. Chen said finally. I worked for her for 30 years. She was demanding, sometimes cruel, always exacting. But she was also brilliant, generous to those she trusted, and deeply, deeply wounded by Isabelle's leaving. Did you know my mother? Briefly, when she was very young. She was creative, spirited, full of joy. Charlotte didn't know what to do with joy. She understood ambition, discipline, power. A daughter who wanted to paint instead of lead board meetings was incomprehensible to her. So she drove her away. She loved her away, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. There's a difference. Bad love is still love, just expressed poorly. Your mother ran because she needed to find out who she was, without Charlotte's expectations defining her. Your grandmother spent the rest of her life regretting that she'd made running away seem like the only option. What am I supposed to do with all of this? The question encompassed the fortune, the legacy, the weight of being the last Whitmore. Whatever you want, that's the gift and the curse of it. Mrs. Chen stood, preparing to leave, but maybe start by forgiving them both. Your mother for leaving you in the system, your grandmother for not finding you sooner, and yourself for surviving in whatever ways you had to. After she left, I opened the last journal again, reading Charlotte's final words. To my granddaughter, if you exist and ever read this, you owe me nothing. Not gratitude, not forgiveness, not carrying on any legacy. The money is yours to use or discard as you see fit. I give it freely, with no strings, because I learned too late that real love doesn't come with conditions. Be whoever you want to be. Make whatever life calls to you. Just be braver than I was. Be freer than your mother could be. Be wholly, completely, unapologetically yourself. I held the journal to my chest and made a decision. The press conference was my idea, though Richard tried to talk me out of it. You don't owe the public anything, he argued. Let the media speculation die down naturally. No, I was standing in front of the mirror in the main house, Charlotte's house, which I'd finally moved into last week. The woman looking back at me was still too thin, still carried shadows in her eyes, but she stood straighter now. She looked less like a victim and more like someone who'd survived and chosen to do something with that survival. I have something to say. The ballroom of the Four Seasons was packed with journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers. I stood at the podium in a simple black dress, my mother's photograph in my pocket, and my grandmother's words in my heart. My name is Maya Whitmore, I began, my voice amplified through speakers that made it sound stronger than I felt. 6 months ago, I was homeless, sleeping in an alley, invisible to a society that had decided I didn't matter. Today, I'm a billionaire. I'm not here to explain how that happened. Those details are public. I'm here to explain what I'm going to do about it. The room went silent. I've spent 6 months learning about my grandmother, Charlotte Whitmore. She was brilliant, ruthless, and deeply flawed. She built an empire but lost her daughter in the process. She spent 22 years searching for redemption in the form of a granddaughter she'd never met. Me. I pulled out the photograph. This is my mother, Isabelle. She ran away at 18 because she felt suffocated by expectations she couldn't meet. She died at 24, alone, trying to build a life on her own terms. She left me nothing but this picture and a question I've been trying to answer. How do you honor both women's choices? Someone in the audience coughed. Cameras clicked. I've decided the answer is to do what neither of them could, build something that's both strong and kind. So here's what I'm doing with the Whitmore fortune. First, I'm establishing the Isabelle Whitmore Foundation, dedicated to ending homelessness in Boston and eventually across the country. We're starting with $500 million in funding. We'll build housing, not shelters, but actual homes. We'll provide job training, mental health services, addiction support. We'll treat homeless people like they're human beings deserving of dignity, because I know what it's like to be treated as less than human. Second, I'm creating scholarship funds for foster children aging out of the system. Full rides to college or trade schools, plus living expenses and mentorship. No child should enter adulthood with nothing, the way I did. Third, Whitmore Industries will pivot toward social impact investing. We'll still be profitable, I'm not naive, but we'll invest in companies that create jobs, support communities, and build equity. My grandmother built this fortune. I'm going to make sure it means something. The reporters erupted with questions, but I held up my hand. I know what you're thinking, that I'm naive, that I'll waste it all on feel-good projects, that I don't deserve this fortune and am overcompensating with performative charity. Maybe you're right, but 6 months ago I was freezing in an alley, and the only people who cared were other people society had discarded. A veteran named Jimmy who shared his last can of soup. A diner manager named Maria who gave away food she could have taken home to her own family. They showed me that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, it's measured in how you treat people who can do nothing for you in return. So yes, I inherited billions I didn't earn. I can either feel guilty about that for the rest of my life, or I can use it to make sure fewer people have to sleep in alleys, wondering if they'll see morning. I choose the latter. My grandmother's final words to me, written in a journal she kept for decades, hoping I existed, were to be braver than she was and freer than my mother could be. I'm trying to do both. I'm using her tools, money, power, influence, to build the kind of world my mother might not have needed to run from. I stepped back from the podium. That's all I have to say. Thank you. The ballroom erupted. Applause, shouted questions, camera flashes. Richard was grinning beside me, pride evident on his face. But the moment that mattered came later, back at the estate, when Mrs. Chen found me in the garden. "There's someone at the gate asking for you," she said carefully. "A man named Jimmy. Says he knows you from before." My heart leapt. "Let him in, please." Jimmy looked better, cleaner, healthier, but his eyes were the same when he shuffled into the estate's grand foyer, looking overwhelmed and out of place. "Maya." He said my name like a prayer. "I saw the press conference. I just wanted to... I don't know. Say I'm proud of you, kid." I crossed the space between us and hugged him tight. "You're the reason I survived. You and Maria and everyone else who saw me when the world looked through me. You survived because you're strong." I survived because people were kind when they didn't have to be. I pulled back, looking at him seriously. The foundation is real, Jimmy. We break ground on the first housing complex next month. 100 units, fully furnished, with social services on site. I want you to be part of it. Not as a resident, though you're welcome to that too. As a consultant. You know what homeless people need better than any social worker. Help me build something that actually works. His eyes filled with tears. I don't know anything about... You know about survival, about community, about making dignity possible in impossible circumstances. That's the expertise I need. I smiled. Plus, the job comes with housing, salary, and benefits. What do you say? He wiped his eyes. I say Charlotte Whitmore's granddaughter is nothing like Charlotte Whitmore, in the best possible way. 1 year later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Retry M Continue Isabelle Whitmore housing complex. 150 units of permanent supportive housing, each a real apartment with a kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, and most importantly, dignity. Jimmy stood beside me, now the director of community engagement, wearing a suit he'd picked out himself and a smile that hadn't left his face in months. Maria from the diner was there too, wiping tears as she watched families move into their new homes. I'd offered her a position managing the complex's community kitchen, where residents could learn culinary skills and eventually gain employment. She'd accepted immediately. Your grandmother would have hated this, Richard said quietly, standing at my shoulder as cameras documented the moment. Would she? I gestured to the building, modern and beautiful, the Whitmore name etched above the entrance. She built monuments to herself all over this city. This is just another one, but this one actually helps people. Fair point, he smiled. Though I think she'd be surprised that helping people and honoring her legacy aren't mutually exclusive. The local news interviewed residents, single mothers who'd been living in their cars, veterans who'd spent decades on the streets, young people aging out of foster care who'd been facing the same fate I'd narrowly escaped. Each story was unique, but the thread running through them all was the same: finally being seen, finally mattering, finally having a chance. That evening, I returned to the estate alone. The main house no longer felt like a museum or a mausoleum. I'd slowly made it mine, filling it with art from local creators, books from authors who wrote about real struggles, photographs of the people who'd helped me survive those 2 years in the cold. But tonight, I climbed the stairs to Charlotte's old study, a room I'd left untouched since moving in. Her desk still held fountain pens she'd used to sign million-dollar deals. Her shelves still contained books on business strategy, finance, power dynamics, everything arranged precisely, perfectly, coldly. I placed my mother's photograph on the desk, propped against a stack of ledgers. Then I added something new, a photograph from the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Jimmy and Maria and me, arms around each other, laughing. Former homeless people and a billionaire heiress, connected not by money but by the understanding of what it means to be discarded and to choose, despite everything, to care about others. I think I figured it out, I said aloud to the grandmother I'd never met. You wanted to protect Mom by making her strong. She wanted to protect herself by running away. You were both trying to survive in a world that's hard on women, hard on anyone who doesn't fit the mold. I ran my fingers along the desk's polished surface. But here's what I learned sleeping in that alley. Strength isn't the opposite of vulnerability. Power isn't the opposite of compassion. You can be both fierce and kind. You can build empires and still see the people those empires were built on. The study was silent, but I felt something shift. Maybe just in my own understanding. Maybe something more. I forgive you, I whispered, for not finding me sooner, for driving Mom away, For thinking love had to be hard to be real. You did your best with what you knew, and your best gave me the tools to do better. I pulled out my phone and looked at the text messages that had been flooding in all day. From the mayor, "This is just the beginning. What else can the city partner with you on?" From a venture capital firm, "Interested in discussing social impact investments. Your model is revolutionary." From a college I'd applied to 3 years ago and been rejected from, "Would you consider speaking at our commencement? Our students would benefit from your perspective." And one more from a number I didn't recognize. "My name is Sophie. I was in foster care too. Your foundation gave me a scholarship. I start college next month. Thank you for seeing us." That last message made everything worth it. The scrutiny, the pressure, the constant feeling of being an imposter in designer clothes. If even one person got a chance they wouldn't have had otherwise, every uncomfortable moment was justified. I typed back, "Thank you for having the courage to keep going. You're going to do amazing things. And Sophie, you always mattered. The scholarship just made it official." 18 months after Richard found me in that alley, I sat in the Whitmore Industries boardroom, the same room where Gerald had questioned my right to be there. But Gerald had retired with a generous severance package, and the board now included Jimmy, Maria, two formerly homeless individuals who'd become community advocates, a social worker, and several business minds who understood that profit and purpose weren't mutually exclusive. "The Q3 numbers are in," announced David Chen, our new CFO. "Whitmore Industries is up 12% year over year, and our social impact investments are outperforming traditional portfolios. The market is responding positively to our model." "How's the foundation doing?" I asked. "The Isabelle Whitmore Foundation has housed 847 individuals across 3 cities, reported Jennifer, our foundation director. "Employment rate among residents is 73%, far above the national average for supportive housing. We've received requests from 15 other cities to replicate the model." Jimmy leaned forward. "And retention is at 94%. People are staying housed because we're not just giving them a roof. We're giving them community, purpose, support. Everything Maya insisted on from day one. Because I knew what was missing when I was out there," I said. "Nobody wants charity. They want a chance. They want to be seen as capable of more than their worst moment." "Speaking of being seen," David interjected with a smile, "Forbes wants to do a feature. The billionaire who lived on the streets. How Maya Whitmore is redefining wealth." I groaned. "More press." "Part of the job," Richard reminded me. "Your visibility helps the cause." He was right, though I still hated the attention. But if being the poster child for second chances meant more funding, more support, more cities willing to try something different, I'd endure it. After the meeting, I found myself back in Charlotte's study. It had slowly become my favorite room in the house, no longer a shrine to her memory, but a workspace where I plotted how to use her fortune for purposes she'd never imagined. I'd added more photographs over the months. The housing complex. The first scholarship recipients, Jimmy teaching culinary classes, Maria's daughter graduating high school, the first in their family. Each image a small victory, a life changed, a person seen. But I'd also kept Charlotte's things, her pens, her books, even her coffee mug with "The buck stops here" printed on the side. Because honoring her didn't mean erasing her. It meant understanding that she was complicated, flawed, trying her best in a world that demanded women be perfect or powerful, but rarely allowed them to be both. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Your mother would be proud. Charlotte too, even if she'd never admit it." I smiled, typing back. "I hope they're both proud. But mostly I hope they'd understand that I'm trying to be neither of them and both of them. Something new." That's called growth, he replied. It looks good on you. 2 years after that night in the alley, I received an unexpected visitor. There's a woman here to see you, Mrs. Chen announced, her voice careful. She says her name is Jessica Brooks, claims to be your half-sister. My heart stopped. What? She has documentation. Birth certificate showing Isabelle Brooks as her mother, dated 2 years after you were born. Richard is verifying, but the paperwork looks legitimate. The woman waiting in the foyer was about 22, with my mother's eyes and a hesitant smile. She clutched a folder like a lifeline, looking as terrified as I'd felt that first night in the guest house. I'm sorry to show up like this, she said immediately. I've been working up the courage for months. I saw the press conference, the foundation work, all of it. And I thought maybe you'd want to know you have family. Real family, not just the fortune and the name. How? My voice cracked. How did I not know about you? Mom put me up for adoption right after I was born. Open adoption. I knew who she was, had letters from her until she died. She wrote about you in every single one. Her first miracle, she called you. She said she had to give me up because she could barely take care of herself, let alone 2 kids. But she loved us both. I have the letters if you want to read them. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Jessica continued, words tumbling out nervously. I was adopted by a good family. I had a normal childhood, went to college, became a teacher. But I always wondered about you, the older sister Mom wrote about. When you inherited the Whitmore fortune, I thought about reaching out, but I didn't want you to think I was after money. Then I saw what you were doing with the foundation, and I thought, maybe we could know each other, as sisters, if you want. If I want? The words came out strangled. I spent my entire life thinking I had no family, that I was completely alone. Do you have any idea? I couldn't finish. Tears were streaming down my face, years of loneliness and longing, finally finding an outlet. Jessica was crying too. I'm sorry. I should have reached out sooner. I just didn't know if you'd want a sister who came with no fortune, no useful connections, just me. Just you is everything. I crossed the space between us and hugged her, this stranger who was my sister, this miracle I hadn't known to hope for. Just you is more than I ever thought I'd have. We spent hours in the garden, reading our mother's letters together. Isabelle's words painted a picture of a woman who'd loved imperfectly but deeply, who'd made impossible choices and lived with the consequences, who'd wanted more for her daughters than she'd been able to give herself. To Maya, my fierce one, you were born fighting, born surviving. I hope you never had to fight as hard as I fear you will. I hope you found softness somewhere. To Jessica, my gentle one, I gave you to parents who could give you stability. It's killing me, but I know it's right. I hope you never doubt you were wanted. To both my girls, if you ever find each other, you are not mistakes. You are not accidents. You are the best things I ever did, even if I did them imperfectly. Love each other. Be there for each other. Be the family I couldn't quite manage to be. She tried so hard, Jessica whispered, wiping her eyes. My adoptive parents showed me her letters over the years. She was drowning, working 3 jobs, dealing with depression, barely surviving. But she wrote to us. She never stopped trying to be present even when she couldn't be there. I wish I'd known her. The old grief, the one I'd carried for 24 years, felt different now. Not lighter, but less isolating. I wish I'd known I wasn't alone. You're not alone anymore. Jessica squeezed my hand. If you want a sister who teaches 4th grade, lives in a tiny apartment in Cambridge, and has no idea what to do at fancy galas, you've got one. I laughed through tears. I want exactly that sister, and she's going to help me figure out what to do with this fortune. Because I'm still making it up as I go. Deal. But I'm not moving into this mansion. It's terrifying. The guest house? Still terrifying, but negotiable. 3 years after the alley, the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala was in full swing. The ballroom glittered with Boston's elite, politicians, philanthropists, business leaders, all there to celebrate the foundation's expansion to 12 cities and the housing of over 3,000 individuals. But the guests I was most proud of weren't the wealthy donors. They were the formerly homeless individuals who'd become community leaders, the foster youth who were now college graduates, the people who proved that what someone needs isn't charity, it's a genuine chance. Jimmy took the stage to thunderous applause. His speech about rebuilding life after loss, moving several donors to tears and opening their checkbooks. Maria's catering company, launched with foundation support, provided the elegant meal, her daughter working as head server, saving for culinary school. And Jessica stood beside me in a dress I'd bought over her protests, laughing as we watched our strange, cobbled-together family celebrate victories that had seemed impossible just 3 years ago. "Mom would have loved this," Jessica said softly. "All these people working together, building something good." "Charlotte would have thought it was too soft," I replied, "but she'd have been secretly proud, in her own complicated way." "And you?" Jessica turned to me. "Are you happy? Really happy, not just doing good work happy?" I considered the question. Was I happy? I still had nightmares about the alley, about the cold, about the terror of invisibility. I still felt like an imposter in designer clothes, still questioned whether I deserved any of this. The wealth made me uncomfortable, the attention exhausting, the responsibility crushing. But I had a sister. I had friends who knew me before the money and saw past it now. I had purpose, not just work, but calling. And I had peace with my ghosts, the mother who'd tried her best, the grandmother who'd loved poorly but genuinely, the girl in the alley who'd survived long enough to become someone who could help others survive too. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I actually am. It's messy and complicated, and nothing like I imagined when I thought about what happiness might look like. But it's real. It's mine. And I'm grateful for every single day, even the hard ones." "Good," Jessica hugged me. "Because you deserve it, all of it. The happiness, the success, the family, everything." "So do you. So does everyone," she corrected gently. "That's kind of your whole point, right?" Right. That was exactly the point. Later that night, after the gala ended and the guests departed, I returned to Charlotte's study one final time. I'd made a decision that had been brewing for months. I pulled out a piece of Whitmore Industries letterhead and began to write, "To whoever inherits this foundation after me. You're probably reading this because I'm gone, and you're trying to figure out what to do with a fortune and a responsibility you didn't ask for. I understand. I was there once, terrified and overwhelmed, sure I'd fail. Here's what I learned. Wealth isn't just money. It's opportunity, access, the chance to make choices others can't. You can use it to build walls around yourself, like my grandmother did. You can run from it, like my mother did. Or you can use it as a tool to build the world you want to live in. I chose the third option. Not because I'm noble or special, I'm not. I chose it because I spent 2 years invisible, and I decided that if I somehow became visible, I'd use that visibility to see others. To make sure people like Jimmy, Maria, Jessica, and the thousands more living on margins and in shadows knew they mattered. The foundation isn't charity, it's justice. It's saying that human dignity shouldn't depend on bank accounts or last names or luck. It's proving that when you invest in people, really invest, with respect and resources and belief, they don't just survive, they thrive. So here's my advice. Don't try to be me or Charlotte or Isabelle. Be whoever you are, but be that person with intention. Use this fortune to bridge gaps, build equity, create chances, and remember that the people you're helping aren't projects or statistics. They're you, in slightly different circumstances. Treat them accordingly. Be brave, be kind, be both, because the world needs people who refuse to choose between strength and compassion. With hope for your journey, Maya Isabelle Whitmore. I sealed the letter and placed it in the safe, along with Charlotte's journals and my mother's letters. Someday someone would read it. Someday this fortune would pass to new hands, and they'd face their own choices about what wealth means and how to wield it. But tonight it was mine, and I was finally at peace with that. I walked out of the study, through the halls of the house that had once belonged to a grandmother I'd never known, carrying the legacy of a mother I barely remembered, building a future for a sister I'd just found and thousands of people I'd probably never meet. The girl from the alley would have thought this was impossible, too big, too much, too far from the cold cardboard and desperate prayers that had defined her existence. But that girl had survived. And in surviving, she discovered something more important than fortune or fame or even family. She discovered that being seen was just the beginning. The real miracle was learning to see others with the same fierce compassion she'd once desperately needed herself. And that made every impossible thing possible. Maya went from homeless to a billionaire and used her fortune to lift others up. If you had unlimited resources, what's the first thing you do to help people? And have you ever been helped by a stranger's kindness when you needed it most? Share your story below. Your words might be exactly what someone needs to hear today.